Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for September 12th, 2024. Kīlauea continues to show earthquakes on its Upper East Rift connector and the Middle East Rift zone by Makaopuhi crater. This is continuing the pattern of adjustment following the intrusions we've had in this area over the past month and a half or so. But no major changes, nothing really significant has changed. We're just seeing the continued movement of magma within the summit area, which seems to be slowing in this Upper East Rift and Middle East Rift area, and perhaps speeding up a little bit in the summit area, very slightly, within the same kind of pulsing pattern that we've seen over the last few months. Downrift of the Makaopuhi area by Puʻu'ōʻō, there is still no sign of ground movement relating to magma injecting underneath there. So the threat still remains within a national park for any activity to happen. And while things are adjusting underground now, that's usually what happens, there is still a chance that some new pulse of activity might lead to a crack that makes its way all the way to the surface and releases an eruption. So that's still a possibility, but doesn't seem very imminent at this point in time. If we look at the earthquake rates, we can see here that we've climbed up today in our counts after a lull earlier in the week, but this is following that cycle of pulses and the counts of earthquakes that we're getting here. That follows the last big adjustment we had in mid-August. Looking at the tilt meters, as our GPS data is still not updating to the website, we can see that at the summit at Uekahuna, over the last week, we have, over the last month, we can see this net gain in tilt here. And while last week, this pattern was more or less flat, you can see that over this most recent week, it has actually been rising. Not huge amounts, but it is resuming inflation at the summit there. If we go closer to the recent intrusion site by the escape road, we can see continued movement of the different components of ground tilt here. But they're not moving nearly as fast as during the intrusion or subsequent adjustment periods that we've had. Even through here, we can see the rate was a little steeper and has been flattening out more recently over the last week here. So that seems to be stabilizing in the intrusion area. Moving further down to the Puʻu'ōʻō area, here's where we can see in the blue line the signal that points to the rift zone under Puʻu'ōʻō, and it continues to deflate. The signal we do detect there is coming from the west, and this green line component that is detecting the inflation from the Makaopuhi reservoir to the west. So that's the story in Kīlauea, similar to recent weeks, a little slower here, but with the same prognosis looking forward. Turning to Maunaloa, it's been fairly quiet there as well. Here are earthquakes per month, still very low on Maunaloa as we recover from the 2022 eruption that had much higher counts of earthquakes. Looking at the tilt on Maunaloa summit, you can see here it is a very slow inflation pattern happening. And we happen to see this very well because of this earthquake jolt that reset the scale on the tilt meter here. So this is really showing us the long-term pattern a little more clearly because of that automatic scaling. As far as where those earthquakes are occurring, there's very few. They're in the summit area, and there are a couple of notable ones that have been have registered that are deeper than typical earthquakes under the summit here. And to recap this particular storyline, we have seen this recently within the last year. And this is a plot of depth versus time here. And so these colored purples, blues, and greens you see actually began to flare up a little less than a year ago here and have come in several pulses of activity as we imagine that magma from deep is replenishing the reservoir, and then the island underneath the mountain is also adjusting to the redistribution of weight. So that may be returning with these two most recent events, but we will await the developments on Maunaloa to see what happens. That still does not lead to any increased threat of activity on the volcano. It's just an interesting follow-up to this recharge pattern following 2022. And that's our summary for this week.